Solodov, who's the governor of the Far East and Kamchatka region and a Putin loyalist, spoke to reporters after casting his vote.
Kamchatka will set an example so that everyone can take part in the election and, as a single organism, a united people, express their opinion regarding what we want our country to be like in the future, what we all rally around and what we hope for in the future.
The Israeli government has rejected criticism from US Senate leader Chuck Schumer after he described Benjamin Netanyahu as an obstacle to peace. A spokesman said the Prime Minister had been elected by a wide majority. Speaking in Congress, Mr. Schumer also urged Israel to do more to protect civilians in Gaza. Alison Griffin from Save the Children wants urgent action.
We've heard about maritime corridors this week, about aid drops in the sky, both of which about these new islands. They're costly and inefficient ways to deliver aid, and most importantly, they take time that children in Gaza right now who are dying from malnutrition do not have. I mean, this is a war on children. It's a war on their childhood.
The Hamas-run Health Ministry has accused Israeli forces of killing at least 20 people in Gaza City as they waited for lorries carrying aid. The Israeli military has denied the accusations. The Conservatives have refused to confirm or deny reports that the donor at the centre of a racism row has given more money to the party. Frank Hester has apologised for being rude about the MP, Diane Abbott, but said his comments were nothing to do with skin colour. Downing Street called them racist, and opposition parties have said the Tory should return his donations. The link between health and wealth has been highlighted by a new study. It shows the risk of death from drugs or suicide is higher in more deprived areas in the north of England and in seaside towns. Researchers from a group called Health Equality North found that factors such as alcohol use and unskilled jobs drove up risk. Death rates in England were highest in Blackpool, where they were 6 times the rate of the lowest area, Barnet in North London. Stephen Brown works with addicts in Blackpool to help turn their lives around, based on his own experience.
Growing up, most of us started taking drugs, and I don't know how he called my brother, and most of us started taking drugs, and then once you're stuck in it, in my experience, I didn't know that people recovered. I didn't see anybody recover. You either went to prison or you died.
The actor Pierce Brosnan has been fined about £400 for trespassing in a banned area of Yellowstone National Park. The James Bond star had initially pleaded not guilty to the charge in January, but changed his plea when he appeared in court in Wyoming. Hikers are not permitted to leave designated trails in the park, which is famous for its hot springs and geysers. Now Elizabeth Rizzini is back with today's weather.
Hello, thank you, Caroline. Well, look, the unsettled and mild picture continues for most of us today, but we will start to draw in some cooler feeling air as we go through the day, and then tonight will be drier and colder with a bit of frost for many of us. In a bit more detail then, for Scotland today, a touch of frost in the Highlands. Other than that, very mild temperatures for most 4 to 9 degrees Celsius. It's cloudy, there are some outbreaks of rain, mostly in the north and the west, and coastal and hill fog around as well, and that cloud and rain will sink southwards across Scotland and through the day. Some sunny spells developing later with more of a northerly wind and a few showers in northern Scotland, but generally turning colder and brighter. Now for Northern Ireland, again it's a very mild start with plenty of clouds and patchy rain, but it will turn brighter later with some sunshine and a freshening northwesterly wind. For Northern England and for Wales, it's a mild start, temperatures in double figures for many. Lots of low cloud around, some coastal, some hill fog, some outbreaks of rain. It's particularly heavy at the moment. Gradually clear through the day. It's generally going to stay quite cloudy. We could see some brighter spells perhaps develop a bit later on through the afternoon. And across southern England, East Anglia and the Midlands, again a very mild start, some clouds, some sunny spells and some showers. So mixed picture pretty much all day, and maybe 1 or 2 thunderstorms developing later on through the afternoon, given a bit of daytime heating. It's windy too along the south coast and through the Channel Islands. A little cooler for most than it was yesterday, 12 to 15 in the south and the east, 10 to 13 for Wales, 7 to 11 Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Time now to look at the papers, and The Guardian is unimpressed by the government's new definition of extremism. The paper's leader column suggests that the measure announced by the Communities Secretary Michael Gove is more likely to stoke divisions within society rather than ease them. Had community cohesion and tackling hatred truly been a priority, it states, A full public consultation and proper engagement with faith groups would have been the right way forward. But the Times takes a more positive view, arguing that the definition will provide useful guidance to public bodies. There's always the danger, it points out, that in a tolerant society like Britain's, extremist groups will try to cosy up to officialdom by portraying themselves as representatives of community opinion or special interests. The paper concludes that publishing a list of groups deemed to pose a threat to democracy is a reasonable exercise in due diligence. The headline for the Eye is Number 10 anxiety grows as angry Tories question Sunak authority. The paper quotes an unnamed Conservative source saying that recent setbacks for the Prime Minister have left the mood among some backbenchers shifting from resigned to actively angry. Working hours for the Commons hit record low under Sunak is the lead in the Financial Times. It's conducted analysis suggesting the average duration of a Commons sitting day in the current parliamentary session has been 7 hours and 9 minutes. The paper says this is shorter than in any other session in the past quarter century. Opposition parties say this suggests the administration is running out of steam. But a spokesman for the Commons leader, Penny Mordaunt, insists the government has a packed legislative agenda. The Telegraph is concerned about plans by NHS England to conduct trials of electric ambulances. It reports that pilot schemes are due to begin in several parts of the country next month. A spokesman for the College of Paramedics is quoted saying, "If I have a very sick patient and I'm trying to get them to hospital, I don't want to be worrying about the battery." But the NHS tells the paper that although patient care comes first, it's also right that we seek green alternatives. Russia attacks Shap's RAF jet by jamming GPS, says the Mail. It's outraged that an aircraft carrying the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps suffered a satellite and communications blackout close to Russian territory. A defence expert tells The Sun that such an attack was wildly irresponsible. He's quoted saying that while the RAF are well prepared to deal with this, it still puts unnecessary risk on civilian aircraft and potentially endangers lives. Finally, the Mirror reports on what could be Britain's smartest dog. Max, a border collie, has learned the names of all 231 of his toys. The paper explains that his owners, Martin and Helen Morris, line up a selection of toys every night and shout out their names, and Max is able to identify them correctly and fetch them. There's still work to do to break the international record, however, as it's revealed that a collie in the United States has learned the names of more than 1,000 toys. Now, business and workers at the Office for National Statistics could stage a walkout in a dispute about working from home. The details from Monica Miller.
Around 1,000 members of the Public and Commercial Services Union in several offices across the UK will vote in the coming weeks on whether to launch a campaign of industrial action. The union says its members were being told to work from their office for 2 days a week after previously being allowed to work from home since the start of the lockdown. The PSA's General Secretary says the move has caused anger among staff demoralized by a lack of trust and the need for rapid changes to their childcare and other arrangements. France's lower house of parliament has approved a bill designed to make it less attractive for people to buy what is known as fast fashion. If the Senate approves the law, the government says France will become the first country to tackle the environmental and social problems caused by a flood of cheap imported clothes. The measure includes taxes on low-cost items, particularly from China, and a partial ban on advertising. Critics say the textile industry is responsible for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions and widespread water pollution. Shares in U.S. Steel have dropped for a second day after President Joe Biden came out against the proposed sale of the company to a Japanese steelmaker. Nippon Steel agreed to purchase the American firm for 11.7 billion pounds in December. This comes ahead of his meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida next month. In the city, the 100 share index ended the day down 29 points at 7,743. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones was down 138 points at 38,905. On the currency markets, the pound is trading at $1.27.3 against the euro. Sterling is at €1.17. That makes a euro worth 85.4 pence.
Sport now, and Liverpool and West Ham have both reached the quarter-finals of the Europa League with comfortable aggregate victories. With the details and the rest of the action, here's Chris Coles.
Liverpool won 6-1 at Anfield, 11-2 overall, while West Ham thrashed Freiburg 5-0, overturning a 1-0 first leg deficit. Rangers are outbeaten 1-0 by Benfica at Ibrox, while Brighton beat Roma 1-0, but were knocked out 4-1 on aggregate. Aston Villa are into the last 8 of the Europa Conference League after a 4-0 home victory over Ajax. Rory McIlroy is in a share of the lead at Golf's Players' Championship after an opening round of 65. He's 7 under par alongside the Americans Xander Schauffele and Wyndham Clark. In tennis, the Australian Open champion Jannik Sinner beat Yuri Lehechka in straight sets to reach the semi-finals at Indian Wells in California. He's on a 19-match winning run and faces Carlos Alcaraz next. And Galopin Des Champs bids to defend the Cheltenham Gold Cup later today, with the big race marking its 100th anniversary. The record-breaking Irish trainer Willie Mullins is looking to win the showpiece event for the 4th time in 6 years.
Finally, a glance back at some of the stories that were making news on this date in earlier years. In 2022, a Russian TV journalist appeared in court after staging a protest against the invasion of Ukraine. Marina Ovsyannikova had run behind the newsreader on a popular state-controlled channel, shouting and holding a poster which read "Stop the War." She was fined around £200. Outside the court, she explained her actions.
It was my own anti-war decision. I made this decision by myself because I don't like Russia start this invasion. It was really terrible.
On this date in 2019, a gunman killed 51 people and wounded 40 others at 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch in New Zealand. An Australian white supremacist, Brendan Tarrant, was subsequently jailed for life without parole. Scientists in the US announced in 2004 that they'd discovered an object on the edge of the solar system with the longest orbit around the Sun. The dwarf planet Sedna takes more than 11,000 years to make the trip. And that's the end of News Briefing. Now on BBC Radio 4, it's time for Prayer for the Day with the Reverend Kate Horton.
Good morning. I can't wait for the clocks to go forward. This year, it's on Easter Day, and I'm not a big fan of that, because at my church we have a sunrise service at Easter, starting at 6 a.m, which means I need to get up no later than 5 a.m, but that'll feel like 4 a.m, which is very early indeed. I am absolutely not a morning person at all, so I know I won't enjoy my alarm going off that day. Having said that, it'll all be worth it in the end, because the clocks changing means lighter nights are on their way. I know that all of the seasons have their place, and all of them are important in their different ways, but spring is my favourite. I love that spring feels full of hope and possibility and new life. I love to see spring flowers bursting into bloom. I like finally beginning to feel a bit warmer. I like that spring means that my April birthday is approaching. But most of all, I like the fact that the clock change and the arrival of spring mean that there will be more light to be enjoyed each day. In the Christian faith, and in many others, light is really important. In John's Gospel, Jesus is recorded as saying 7 statements, all beginning with, I am. One of the most well-known of these is, I am the light of the world. Loving Lord Jesus, would you shine your light into the dark places today, of our own hearts and lives, and our families.
so that it's ready to wash the gut, to clean it, and to process it with chemicals. My name is Daniel Sitkins, and I've been working with Vobran for 25 years. This is the processing tank. This is where basically we process it with chemicals to get it to a position where we can change the colour, the strength, the
We're now in drying room 1. This is a drying room that's been used since the building was built in 1915.
It's just the finished product.
After they've had their baths and their spinning and everything, they come in here and they can stay here for up to 9 days. This one is a 1.6 millimeter gauge, 0 of a millimeter difference between gauges. The strings that are in there are specifically for pots, but it's to have much thinner strings. We've had a lot of interest now for early music, the fields we're making, old-style mandolins, baroque instruments, original baroque instruments.
Bob Walker reporting there. Badger culling could continue indefinitely in England under new government proposals which reverse earlier pledges to begin to phase out badger culls from next year. The government says culls are working in helping to reduce TB in cattle, pointing to stats from the first 52 cull areas where there is an average reduction in TB breakdowns in cattle of 56% after 4 years of culling. Now ministers say that in high-risk and edge areas, which covers much of southwest and central England, culling could continue until the chief veterinary officer deems that the situation has improved, at which point badger vaccination will be introduced. A consultation on the proposals has just been launched. The Badger Trust describes this as another appalling attack on a protected native species and claims it could lead to 100% of badgers being killed in areas where TB is found in cattle. Christine Middlemiss is the UK's chief vet.
I've always said, and I think I've said in this programme before, that I'd like to keep culling as a tool in the box for when we have evidence that badgers in the area are part of the problem, and that's exactly what we're proposing. It's moving to epidemiological-led culling in cluster areas, smaller areas than we have been doing, and where there's clear epidemiological evidence that badgers are involved in the issue.
So does that mean testing the badgers to make sure they have TB?
Yes, it will involve collecting a number of badger carcasses and testing them, and where we have whole genome sequencing evidence that it is the same genome sequence, a linked genome sequence to the infection we're seeing in cattle in the area. That I expect to be one of the criteria that would trigger culling.
But under these proposals, presumably, culling could continue indefinitely.
It will be dependent on what happens to the disease in the area. Basically, it's a similar approach to we've used in the hotspot area.